Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our mid-month mental health check-in. I'm Michelle Beatty, a project manager and mental health advocate.
And I'm Valerie Carmel Dorseville, a licensed clinical social worker.
We are getting into our routine of doing this every month, and so we're excited for this opportunity to share. We just want to check in and this month we decided that our focus is going to be on burnout. We're in quarter one, we're in the thick of it. A lot of change is taking place in our workplaces, and we just wanted to just talk about how to navigate burnout in quarter one, because for some people it's feeling like quarter four already. So what does that look like? And how are we navigating that? So yes, this is a part of the Keep Your Stride platform, and it's just focused on mental health and how to keep your stride as you go through life and work. This is a spinoff of my work for professional development, and I'm partnering in this whole initiative with Valerie because she's a therapist, a licensed therapist. And this is just what she does, and this is how she has a passion for people, helping them navigate life and thriving in it. So, Valerie, let's just talk about the definition of burnout.
Okay, so burnout is defined as mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion that is usually triggered by prolonged periods of stress and strain. And that's a little bit different than what some people would look at when it comes to burnout, because we're not talking about just a 1 day situation. We're talking about something that has been going on for days, weeks, sometimes even months before people ultimately recognize that's what they're experiencing. So, for you as a project manager, like, have you seen burnout kind of manifest for you and or some of your colleagues throughout this time?
Burnout seems like it bubbles up when dealing with challenging projects or multi-layered projects, not just like a singular piece. When you're dealing with stakeholders at different levels and different personalities and all of that, I think just the toll it can take on managing the task and personality simultaneously, which is what we do. But maybe some are more intense than others. And I think over time, you're focused on accomplishing the end goal and making
Mhm.
sure you're assessing risks and there's no scope creep and all the things, and you're honoring the deadlines and being proactive in identifying something that could turn into a risk or turn into a blocker, right? So I just think burnout just creeps in with project and program managers just driving excellence and making sure that the project stays on track.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense, right? Because when you're looking at the life cycle of the project that you're working on, right? They're oftentimes quite long. Most times people aren't working on a project for 2 days, right? It's things that
Right.
they've been working on for weeks and months at a time. And with the, waxing and waning of different issues kind of coming up over time, that level of stress consistently can over time is what builds the burnout.
So from your experience, how do you feel? What are like warning signs like that you've seen and some of your clients have experienced?
Um, I would say one, the decrease in self care. And I mean for basic things like skipping lunch, skipping breakfast, um, you know, forgetting to drink water, forget that they haven't had a bathroom break. Like just basic things are usually the beginning signs that we are on a slope that you don't want to be on. And then the next one would be irritability. Like over time, you start to feel things are your tolerance for frustration begins to get lower and lower over time. So something that probably you would have been able to brush off maybe 2 weeks ago now is kind of sending you into a little bit of a spiral this week. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
those would probably be some of the really early warning signs that I can mention.
I also think lack of patience creeps
Oh
up.
yeah, yeah, that too. Yeah, like you want everything right now, like not in another minute, not in another second, now. And so, yeah, that, I would definitely add that to the list.
For sure. So, what happens psychologically and sometimes physically when someone consistently pushes through deadlines without prioritizing self care? Because you mentioned it earlier, and I think it's just good to loop back around and expound upon that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, when we are beginning to kind of reduce our overall self-care, what's happening is that ultimately we are interfering with the nutrition that our body needs in order to be able to function. So that's one. Because ultimately there is a really significant link between our nutrition and our mood and how our brain functions, right? Our brain needs fuel. So if you are not filling it with the things that you need to actually function well, you're going to start to ultimately begin to see a decline. So things like focus is going to be impacted. And while that sounds great to just drink, 2, 3 cups of coffee, ultimately coffee does dehydrate you. So if you're not replenishing that with water and things like that, you're ultimately not really helping yourself out. In addition to that, when we're talking about physically, we're talking about things related to people not, holding their bladders for too long, also can lead to potential UTIs, things of that nature. When we're also talking about things when some people, when they are really, really stressed, um, maybe are losing their appetite. So that's another complication that they may notice, as well as that. They're ultimately, sleep is a huge response to increased stress, which is kind of like a little bit of a vicious cycle because when you're stressed out, you don't sleep well, but the more you don't sleep well, the more stressed you become. So you kind of get stuck in this loop. So people are not, so you'll notice like an increase in the insomnia, or people, you're able to fall asleep fine because you're so exhausted from the day. But what you'll find is that people will wake up multiple times in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
So I describe it to my patients as they left too many tabs open in their mind. So like that, even though yes, you've fallen asleep in the background, things are still running, and oftentimes that can wake you up with like random things that you need to remember or do or things like that. So those are really some of the most common things that I'll notice my patients will complain about when they're coming in and wanting to start treatment.
Okay. So, what are some impactful practices or strategies project managers can integrate into their workday to prevent burnout? Like I know you mentioned, make sure that you eat, make sure you drink the water, avoid the tea, the coffee, all that, like flavors. Stick to just good old water, guzzle that. Make sure you're getting the rest. But what are some other things, or are there other practices or tips that you think will be helpful in managing burnout?
Um, it's going to be probably counterintuitive to to what people are probably trying to achieve, but take a break. Like it is, when we're talking about how the body functions, when you are in persistent states of high stress, you actually need the match in recuperation time in order for your body to maintain, homeostasis, right, or equilibrium.
Mhm.
So oftentimes what happens is that the more stressed people become, the less they want to do self-care, but in reality they actually need more of it. So you need more time to recuperate, you need more time to rest, you need more time to like make sure that you're providing that time where you're giving your brain the rest and relaxation that it needs, so that ultimately it's during our time that we're sleeping that the things that you are learning are actually beginning to like formulate in our minds. Like all of the neural pathways and different neurons and things that we need to really incorporate learning happens while we're sleeping. You can't do that while you're awake. So you actually, cutting your nose off to spite your face when you kind of do it in the opposite. The other thing I'll ask my patients: when the last time you touched grass?
Mm.
Like, have you seen the sun? Like, have you gone outside? Like, it seems somewhat counterintuitive. And a lot of times when you have, deadlines and things that you're trying to achieve that are very time sensitive, but ultimately we need to get sunlight, right? We need vitamin D levels is a legitimate issue across this country. So many people are vitamin D deficient, and ultimately that helps to regulate mood. So being able to get outside, get some sunlight, get some fresh air, take a break, and also maybe do a little bit of just some mindfulness, right? I'm big on journaling. Um, and for a lot of ways it's important to have periods of time where you can have a streaming moment of thought without it being interrupted, which is like low key a really guilty pleasure because we get interrupted so many times between Slack messages and emails and things. You just need to give your brain, just 5-10 minutes of some time to decompress, drink some water, sit outside for a little bit, just kind of give your brain a break. You will find that you'll actually be able to think a lot more clearly after that break than if you just tried to thug it out and go all the way through. So
Yeah.
you look like I'm on your street and maybe you think I'm coming for you, but not really. Not that's not the
I turn the
intention.
house light off so you're not looking at you drive by you don't see the light. I turn the light off outside.
I mean, look, I mean, we are all guilty of that, right? I mean, because productivity is an important aspect of the jobs that we do, right? Like we want to get things done and accomplished, but rest is a natural part of the productivity cycle. And so I think as humans, we've kind of forgotten that part. And it's important for us to go back to reincorporating that in the way that we function.
I'm a huge fan of naps.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I love a good nap.
20 minutes is like game changing.
I
I'm
love
like, okay, this is a moment. Like, you know, a day can be demanding. I'm like, I think I need a nap. 20
it.
minutes is like everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
love that.
remember one time, I remember one time I had a manager and the whole team was just having a moment. The whole the vibe was off for the team. And I remember the manager just said in the middle of the meeting, like, I think we need a team nap. And I was just like, I'm in the right place.
I love that. Listen, that's some great leadership skills right there.
She
Right?
did.
Because you got to recognize where people are at in order to like say, okay, here's an intervention I'm going to incorporate for everyone effective right now. Everybody take 15 minutes, go to sleep.
They gave us a time to reconvene, and everyone came back at that time on time. And everyone, whether I don't know if they took a nap or not, but the mood was better, the cohesiveness of communication.
Love
I
that.
was like,
They get it.
top tier.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely, definitely. Because I mean, I don't think there's not too many places where or too many instances where I heard that happen, but ultimately, there's a reason why a lot of other countries do it, right? Like siestas, because people recognize we need to recharge. So I love that that was an experience you got to
Yeah.
have.
I was like, wow, thank you. So let's talk about that more. So how can leaders, from your perspective, and leaders and project managers, they're one and the same in my humble opinion.
Mhm.
How can they create a culture that supports self-care without sacrificing performance?
Right. I mean, for one, I think lead by example, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to be transparent about not only the moments where there are legitimate struggles, but also what is working for them, right?
Mm,
Right. I'm a big proponent for being real with the people that you work with, right? And as a therapist, like I tell my patients, like I go to therapy, and oftentimes they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like I do it for you. Should I not and be able to have the same experience? And I think in a lot of ways, it really allows them to recognize, like, oh no, like this is really an important aspect of my wellness, right? And so I think being able to lead by example and share like the things that they may be doing for themselves and really also encourage other people to do it, and not the like lip service and cute things that you just say because it sounds good, but legitimately being honest about, yeah, I'm realizing, you seem like something's going on. So what can I do to support you? And I think that that's important because oftentimes the reason why people don't take that time because they don't feel like they have the freedom to do it, right? There's one manager who ended up being a really good friend of mine, but one of the things that I loved about her managerial style was that she knew what each members of her team were kind of going through. So she knew if you were really having or dealing with a particular family or dealing with a situation that was really stressful, she would come sit in your office and she'd be like, okay, what can I do for you? Can I take this off of that so you don't have to, maybe let me take some of these calls so that you can go deal with something else because I see how in depth you've been dealing with this particular situation and I recognize it's creating a toll. As leaders, it's important for you to be present, right? She didn't have necessarily the same degree that we had or the same skill set that I had, but there were things that she was willing to do in order to support her team members. And so I think it's important as leadership to be able to have that level of emotional intelligence to understand what your employees and what your team and what your colleagues are going through, and also being willing to offer being part of the solution rather than continuing to be contributing to the problem.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. So, as we wind down this session for the mid-month check-in, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a project manager who wants to stay motivated and healthy um, throughout the remainder of quarter one? Because it's coming. It's definitely trying to get a chokehold on some people. So,
Yeah,
what is some feedback you have, or some suggestions and insight?
I would say number one, give yourself 10-minute breaks. That's one. Take a break. Like, especially when you're feeling the tension starting to mount, take a break, step away, do what you need to do to really kind of allow yourself to bring back down that stress level because our brains don't work when we're highly stressed. They've taken MRIs of people's frontal lobes, the part of your brain that controls that area of like higher cognitive functioning, and it doesn't work the same when you're under high levels of stress. So do yourself a favor and allow yourself some time to decompress. But then too, like celebrate the small wins. Like I totally understand the desire to get to the finish line and getting to the final product, but you only get to the product based off of the process. And so being intentional about how you show up at the smaller steps are just as important to the overall collective goal that you're trying to achieve. So celebrate the small things. Don't only wait till the final product is there in order for you to be proud of what you've been doing.
Oh yeah, I totally love that. Do you have any final thoughts or words?
Hmm. One, I think take care of yourselves, man. Like we have so many external stressors going on, from family and professional life and all the things that are happening in the world. It's important for people to really take the time to take care of themselves. Like I think it's such an underrated experience of people pouring back into themselves because we're all so focused on pouring out into other people and doing all the things, but man, it serves you not to focus solely on the external and not take care of yourself. So I really hope that what we are able to do in our our mid-month check-ins is really to encourage people that you can be successful and productive and do all the things that you desire to do while still maintaining your own well-being. Like you don't have to sacrifice your wellness for success. Like it I really hope that that continues to be a message that people really understand and can really begin to really incorporate in the way that they work and the way that they live their lives.
Oh, I love that. I remember one time I was just going through like a stressful situation at work, and a friend of mine, a colleague that became a friend, which is like the gift, right? They put
Yes.
a sticky note on my monitor and it just said, "Remember to breathe." I was like, right, breathing is an exercise. Like, did you realize you held your breath majority of that call? And I was like, no, they're like, remember to breathe. Like, just the most simple thing. I'm like, okay, noted.
Yeah. I mean, and that's such, I mean, and really that's such great advice because when we're stressed, we don't take full breaths. We take really shallow breaths and we don't recognize that we're doing it that way. So yeah, that was top tier advice. That was top
Hey.
tier advice. Simple, simple, but significant. I love it.
Well, Val, thanks so much for joining me for another mid-month check-in. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the energy and the gems that you share with our audience. And we will definitely be back next month, March
Absolutely.
2025. So thank you for those that have tuned in. Thanks those that are catching the replay. And remember to keep your stride. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.